Hello mga Katipuneros. This is Father Ro Atilano SJ. Listen to our serving of stories that will inspire you and keep you going. Kaya tara na at lasapin ang masarap na timpla ng buhay. Welcome po kayo sa The Parable Cafe every Tuesdays at 3:30 p.m. only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9
Bahala sa iyo, kaibigan ko.
Mamangha sa lalim at ganda ng ating kultura at diwang makabayan, sa mga salita at pahina. Sa tulong ng mga guro at manunulat ng panitikang Pilipino, halina't tuklasin ang yaman ng ating panitikan, ang pamana ng ating lahi. Kasama ang kagawaran ng Filipino ng Pamantasang Ateneo de Manila. Ito ang Sari-Sari, ang pinakamagaling na palatuntunang pang-edukasyon sa 2022 Catholic Mass Media Awards sa bago nitong oras. Martes, ika-4 ng hapon, dito lang sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Radyo Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.
Susunod na ang Lundagin mo, Beybeh, sa Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Radyo Katipunan. Radyo, 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 radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Sa The Blue Eagle kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atenista sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng kwela. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugod, todo sa kayon, dunong at tulog. Lipat na Blue Eagle, kaning giting nagigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan. Radyo, radyo, radyo Katipunan. Radyo Katipunan.
Meron? Ano nga ba ang meron? Paano nga bang mabuhay ng tapat sa meron? Don't you wish you can relive your philo classes? The terror teachers? The terrible oral exams? Or the even terrifying but liberating and life-changing aha moments? Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Here's your chance! Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Kasama ang mga pilosopong sina Jovi, Miroy at Capinding. Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Leaping upward, leaping forward. Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Leaping to greater heights, to greater wisdom, to greater magis. Lundag na, Ateneo!
It's basically, so, yung una personal.
Are we on now? Because they just played Pananagutan. So let's skip that.
Yeah. That's part of the script.
So what do you mean? Are we on?
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
No, but they're still playing the song.
Okay, yeah. Kasi they suddenly played Pananagutan, and isn't that the theme of the whole EDSA?
Of the whole EDSA, yeah.
Yeah.
Nakapiling niya sa ating pagmamahalan at paglilingkod sa kanino man. Tayo ay nagdadala ng balik.
So that's why hindi kami nakapagsimula agad. At bakit nga ba pananagutan, Sir Jovi? I think that's the theme.
Kasi yun yung Conti at 100, Contiveros at 100, at saka yung 50 years.
Team for Ateneo at 38 commemoration ay tayong lahat ay may pananagutan sa isa't isa. Yun din, no? Iban kay Hontiveros, no? Nakatali po yung 100 years of Hontiveros, 50 years of Arupe, and now the 38th year of ating EDSA, no? Tayong lahat ay pananagutan sa isa't isa. So obvious ba ang ating episode ngayon na may kinalaman sa EDSA? Ang ating episode na pinamagatang Bakit EDSA pa rin?
EDSA pa rin. Alright.
Sino nag-isip ng pamagat na yan, sir? Ikaw ba nag-isip ng pamagat na yan?
Ang director ng Martial Law Museum ng Universidad, si Oliver Quintana.
Oo nga, pero yung to pose it as a question, no? Parang ano ba, napipiko na ba? Napipika na ba? Anong pinanggagalingan nito?
Truth to tell, ang dapat show ngayon ay yung social justice, Global Social Justice Day na pinagdiriwang ngayong araw na to. Pero na-move siya next week. So,
but isn't it a lot of...
Kahit sa atin, hindi na din siya ganun ka self-evident yung pagdiriwang na.
Wow, is that sad or alamin natin ha? But I think it's this topic is still very social justice nonetheless, no? So let's begin. Okay.
Sige. Kasi,
so ito po ang ating panatutunan ngayon, pinamagatang Bakit EDSA pa rin? Malamang uunawain natin ngayon ang EDSA sa kanyang ika-38 taon. At meron po kaming mga panauhin na titiyakin ng ating palatuntunan ngayon ay mas malaman at mas kaibig-ibig, no? Sir Jovi, would you introduce?
Hindi ko alam kung if they still need an introduction. Mukhang kilala na sila, no? Yung una ay isang manunulat. At mukhang ngayon ay siya ay dating natuturo sa Ateneo. So lagi ko siya nakikita dati sa cafeteria ng Ateneo. Mukhang ngayon siya ay nasa larangan ng sining. Pero siya ay kilala bilang manunulat. Walang iba kundi si Katrina Stewart.
Santiago.
Magandang hapon. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this invitation.
Thank you, Katrina, for saying yes. You're the founder of People for Accountable Governance and Sustainable Action. Tama ba? Wow.
Yes.
Thank you for saying yes. So we can't wait to ask you our questions. But before that, let's introduce isa pang kapuri-puri at katangi-tangi natin panauhin, Sir Jovi.
Ito talaga kilalang-kilala na ito.
Oo nga, parang masikat pa siya sa show natin talaga.
Oo.
Si Katrina rin naman, no?
Pareho sila.
Yeah.
So ang kilalang ekonomista, hindi ko lang natatandaan yung kanyang blog. Meron siyang sarili niyang blog.
Maybe we can ask him later on.
Paano na lang natin to? Ang ekonomista ng bayan, with a capital B. Joke. Si JC Puno Bayan.
Magandang gabi, Sir Jovi, Sir Ron, and Katrina. Hello sa inyo at maraming salamat sa imbitasyon.
Maraming salamat ulit, JC. Si JC, assistant professor ngayon sa School of Economics ng UP. Tama ba, JC?
Yes, correct po.
Yan po, maraming salamat sa inyong pagpapaunlak. Itong ating show na Bakit EDSA pa rin. Siguro unang tanong namin, siguro for both of you is, I hope you don't mind sharing you or your family's personal involvement in the EDSA revolution. How do you remember EDSA revolution and its aftermath being taught to you? What in turn led you as well to become involved in the history writing field of it? That whole thing, no? So, ang dami kong tanong pero alam niyo na po yung tinutumbok na unang tanong. Anyone can answer first.
Siguro
Miss,
mauna na ako, no?
Miss
Age
Katrina.
before beauty. Oo,
Ganun
mas
ba?
matanda ako kay JC. I was 10 years old, no, when EDSA happened. I was born 1976. So but to me, it was just, a blur of people um, going in and out of our old house in Quezon City. We lived near Quezon Avenue. I had an uncle who was one of the founding members of ATOM, the August 21 movement. So I had a sense of Ninoy Aquino. I had a sense that it was unjust that he had been killed. I had a sense of the snap elections. I remember walking to Santo Domingo Church with my dad that first night to look at the first 2-3 nights to look at election results. And I remember going back and him reporting to my mom what the numbers were like. So these are just, very strange fragments of memories that I also just only recently started remembering as I myself started building the exhibit on EDSA and the civil disobedience campaign in Everything's Fine, my bookshop and gallery in Makati. And which leads me to that next part of the question, which is my involvement. I think that when you grow up with a mother who from 1986 was already gathering materials on EDSA, putting together a chronology, and then just sticking to that project until, a publisher carried it 10 years after. And then until it won a prize 14 years after. Yung parang she just kept at it as more information came in about EDSA. Kept writing new books as new books were being written or as Enrile tried to change the narrative yet again. You kind of also grow up, with this history. So to me, EDSA was real because my mother kept it real. It was something that she didn't stop working on until last year when I insisted after Marcos Jr. won that it was time for maybe a last EDSA book from her, which would already consider the fact. Kasi syempre, she did 3 books on EDSA between 1996 and 2013. And across those 3 books, syempre the goal was to try and make sure they couldn't come back. And when 2022 happened, I kind of felt like, okay, now that they're back, what will the EDSA story sound like? How do we talk to a generation that, doesn't remember it at all, has no sense of it, so much so that they will allow another Marcos presidency to happen. And so it also was a reminder to me as a writer that while historical fact stays the same, the way we tell the story can change. We can tell it differently. We can tell it in different forms. We can have a different tone, a different tenor in telling it so that we actually engage with an ever-changing audience and an ever-changing populace. And I think that has become also, parang I inherited that kind of project from my mom. And at least for me now, the focus really, and even during the pandemic when someone asked if I could do a series of YouTube videos that tracks EDSA, I insisted that it had to be framed in the civil disobedience campaign, which started on February 17. Feb 16, 1986 was when Cory called for it. Feb 17 was the first time people actually started boycotting products that were allied with the Marcoses. And so I felt like that was a part of the narrative that was always being erased, that's rarely talked about, but which I know for sure a younger generation would understand and would appreciate about their parents, their grandmothers, their aunts and uncles, that they joined in a massive boycott of products equated with a dictatorship, enough to actually cripple the economy. So many, practically 6 days before the 4 days of EDSA started. So parang heritage siya, not just of my mom, but also of that period. And I feel like the civil disobedience campaign really is where we should be looking at this point in time.
Right.
Yes, that sounds like cancel culture of the current times, no? Yung civil disobedience and boycott of products. Anyway, thank you very much, Katrina. JC, kumusta? EDSA Revolution, how did it become part of your
JC
life,
ay,
your advocacy?
kailan ka ba pinanganak, JC?
Yun nga the funny thing is that during EDSA, I was minus 3 years old. I was born in 1989, so I have no recollection at all of EDSA. But my parents went to EDSA based on family stories. They kept abreast of what was happening, pero much of my knowledge comes from stories coming from my family. And in fact, I would say that when I was growing up, I still lived through the aftermath, especially the economic aftermath of the crisis during martial law. My parents left in the early 90s as OFWs, and they left me behind. Similar story to what had happened to many other families who couldn't find decent jobs here in the Philippines, and they had to seek greener pastures abroad. So I would say that I lived through EDSA as well as the effects of martial law. Pero my own advocacy of spreading knowledge about what really happened during martial law really started during my PhD coursework. I took it for granted that many people actually didn't know what really happened during that time. I think I just assumed that people knew that there was a crisis, the worst post-war crisis of the Philippines happened during martial law and all that. Pero I began to notice that there was a disconnect between what people knew on the one hand and then what really happened based on facts and the data. So that kind of got me into this rabbit hole, looking at the basic statistics, writing articles for Rappler. And then many years later of giving talks, I thought there was enough material to write a book about this. And therefore, I have that book, False Nostalgia, The Marcos Golden Age Myths and How to Debunk Them, proudly published, by the way, by Ateneo Press. So thank you to Ateneo Press for giving the book a chance. So ayun, I'm very happy to say that many people seem to know more about the economy during martial law, pero not enough people still. So I think it's a continuing work in progress pa rin.
Wow, I haven't read that book. I'd like to read that book suddenly, no? The False Nostalgia.
That's right.
Ako yung vlog lang ni JC.
Title pa lang parang False Nostalgia. How
Yes.
intriguing, no?
By the way, 4 printings na siya by Ateneo Press in just 1 year.
Pero yung vlog mo, ano ba yung podcast o vlog? Anong pamagat ng vlog
Oh
mo?
yes, it's Usapang Econ. So we started with a blog and then we have a podcast. We're a group of economists, not necessarily young anymore, pero we're kind of popularizing economics for young Filipinos. So we also have some podcast episodes on martial law economics.
Yeah. Katrina, I have a question. Back in 2016, you and your mother, Miss Angela Stewart Santiago, were part of the anthology Remembering, Rethinking EDSA. We believe it tried to diversify the narratives and the changing perspectives on EDSA. How significant do you think is that anthology views now? Post Duterte and Marcos Jr. Of course, JC, please feel free to answer no, yung gano'n pa ka-salient yung mga ganong
Okay, ano lang yung
views.
context, Katrina? Because yung tanong eh.
Yung anthology kasi, we were invited to write for it by Carolyn Howe and J. Paul Manzanilla. No? It was a project that we had, I think, proposed to Anvil Publishing. And the invitation came around 2014. And nung una, I kind of thought it was a mistake that they had sent me an invite to. Usually, they should have sent Angela an invitation or Mama an invite. And then I realized when Carol responded, she said, no, we really want the younger generation as part of, younger generation pa ako noong 2014, as part of the anthology. And I think now it's out of print rin. And in fact, for this year's commemoration in relation to the exhibit, we've republished into a zine, no, the essays that Angela and I wrote, because those are not accessible anymore without the book. And her essay was on just keeping at the EDSA story. She called it Stalking EDSA. And then having to deal with being dismissed, being not really being given notice, because she's not part of the academe and not part of the, there exists a group of historians. She's not part of that. And so parang the idea of a popular historian, and the way that she navigates the space, that's very limited naman din talaga for independent historians, no, in the country. My owning EDSA was primarily about freedom, no, the freedom to write the way I want to write, the kinds of criticism I received as someone who also didn't really want to take part, no, in the literary establishment or just engage, no, with the ways in which patronage politics plays a role in our cultural sector. I do think that we looked at that anthology again this year, kasi nga I wanted to do a version with just our 2 essays. And I do think, Ron, na parang now that I think about it, it didn't really age well. I think it couldn't have possibly imagined Duterte becoming president. I think that coming from a time and place when we were under an Aquino presidency, we kind of felt that the enemy then was just elitist politics, no? Which is also what they say we got out of EDSA, no? Just the elitism of the politics afterwards. I don't think we could have anticipated a Duterte presidency din naman, not in our wildest, imaginations. At that point, I think we all thought Jojo Binay was going to be the next president, and he was a totally different creature naman from what we got out of Duterte. Certainly, we didn't imagine a landscape of governance that is dictated by propaganda primarily, no? Na you and it's something that has continued with Marcos Jr. Yung parang nauuna yung propaganda, and it almost doesn't matter if that has a direct link to actual action, no, actual policy. Basta mauna yung propaganda and okay na sila. I don't think we anticipated that. I think that we're still very much trying to get a handle on that part of this landscape. One where Duterte has quite effectively ruined the credibility of media, put into question our institutions related to rights, religion. I think that when I looked at that anthology this year, I thought, wow, what an ideal world where this is the kind of discussion we can have about freedom and democracy. Kasi I think post Duterte, which we have yet to assess really, we are actually supposed to have more complex conversations about what freedom and democracy should be about at this point in time. So yeah, parang maybe time for another anthology, or maybe just more conversations like this one, where we talk about how freedom and democracy have been changed by the past 8 years, no? 6 of Duterte and 2 of Bongo.
But it really has changed, no? Tama ka, parang kulang pa yung pag-assess natin of what... Hindi pa tayo na-debrief masyado.
Hindi pa tayo nagta-trauma counseling. Wala pang trauma counseling.
Yeah. So, thank you, Katrina. Doc JC, considering the facts and figures you have discussed about the Marcos period in false nostalgia, what do you think, as an economist, feeds political-economic myths that are difficult for people to dispose of? Grabe.
Parang tinatanong, bakit despite na hindi siya
na-data na siya ng...
Pabaliktaran yung pinaniniwalaan ng mga tao.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, hirap naman ng tanong, pang dissertation na to. Pero actually, I would say that looking back, we should have seen the signs. Yung SWS, Social Weather Stations, they came up with a study, I think less than a year ago. They actually dug up some of the archived surveys of SWS before kasi tinanong na nila yung mga tao about the Marcoses, their perceptions about the Marcoses. And actually, as early as 1986, the year of EDSA, parang nagwe-win na or parang ang hina pala or parang hindi na ganun ka-strong yung conviction ng mga Pilipino when it comes to the dictatorship and the corruption that happened then. Kasi for example, when SWS asked in 1986, was Marcos Sr. a severe, brutal, or oppressive president? 45% lang ng respondents ang nag-no. And then when they asked in 1987, did Marcos Sr. steal from the people? Medyo over half pa, mga 52% said that he stole from the people. Pero fast forward to 2022, nung tinanong nila, was Marcos a severe, brutal, oppressive president? Just over fifth na lang or about 23% na lang ang nagsabi ng ganun compared to 45% back in 1986. So grabe yung reduction or yung sobrang konti na lang nung nagsasabi na oppressive president siya. And then when it comes to the corruption thing, by 2022, 19% na lang ang nagsabi na nagnakaw daw si Marcos Sr. Wala pang 1/5 ng mga respondents. So parang ganun, parang very steep na pag-decline ng opinions, parang nalilimutan na ng mga later generations yung nangyari during martial law in the dictatorship. So in a way, parang in hindsight, parang hindi na pala dapat kagulat-gulat yung resulta noong 2022 elections. Parang ganun eh. And in fact, in that sense, very valuable yung surveys, past surveys ng SWS kasi hindi nila binabago yung tanong. Exact same question and then in fact more or less the same number of respondents, comparable survey in other words. Pero ganun, very clear na there's parang collective forgetting that's happening. And yun yung nakakalungkot na maybe previous generations or yung post-EDSA generations siguro dapat naging mas aggressive doon sa pag-instill ng lessons ng history. Siguro kailangan talagang dinril sa utak ng mga bata in the basic education system, parte ng curriculum or in fact required subjects sa college or even high school in the same way na for example yung life and works ni Rizal ay required na subject sa college, 'di ba? Siguro something like that pero for martial law and what happened during the dictatorship. So I would attribute it to the education system, yung problem about yung false nostalgia that's happening. Pero at the same time, of course, we have social media, disinformation, etc. Pero I think it's more basic yung failure for to educate the kids about what really happened dun sa basic education system. So more could have been done to memorialize and make sure that the past is not forgotten.
Sir JC, taga-basic education ako, aray naman, joke lang. But what I mean is, I agree, pero ang alam ko naman, although Filipino teacher ako, hindi aralin panlipunan, hindi but we have a lot of we read dekada 70, yung alam ko aralin panlipunan also does this. Ay marami kami peripheral events that in our commemoration of August 21, February 25, marami kaming ginagawang ganoon sa basic ed. Also the parents of these kids sa high school, yan din yung mga matitingkad pa yung memory no 1986. Parang sama-sama. But makakulang pa ka kasi. But I'd also agree dun sa sinabi mo na ang dami ring nakapalibot na iba pa. Meron din talagang sumasadya na burahin eh. So merong may antagonist, no? Hindi lang to pag napabayaan mo lalala. Pwede, habang napapabayaan may nagsasamantala. So ano ba 'yun? Kung meron man. Any of you can answer, no? Ano 'yun? Nasabi mo social media, no? But how could social media be as effective as what they were able to do? So considering how deeply instilled yung mga lessons noong 1986, tapos bigla ang dali palang mawala. So galing din talaga ng mga nanamantala, no? Ano tingin niyo diyon? Ba't pwedeng nangyari 'yon? Siguro that is also my question din nakalista dito, no? What did related to this question, what did you notice about the changes in focus and memorialization in the past decades tungkol sa EDSA? What caused it? What led to it? Anyone can answer.
I think siguro quickly lang, na-notice ko lang din recently, I came from Baguio yesterday, and then parang naisip ko lang bigla na ang dami pang mga kalsada na nakapangalan kay Marcos. Like Marcos Highway, yung papunta sa Baguio, and then dito sa Marikina, di ba Marcos
Ako,
Highway?
taga Marcos Highway ako dito.
Doon sa libro ko, doon sa False Nostalgia, doon sa preface, may sinulat si Professor Noel de Dios ng UP School of Economics. Parang sinabi niya, parang sa Germany halimbawa, parang unimaginable na magkakaroon ng Hitler Highway or Hitler Street. Na parang doon pa lang sa pagpapangalan ng mga kalsada, parang dapat ay binubura na natin or parang hindi na natin binibigyan ng chance na nandyan yung impression na ito paggawa ni Marcos, ito dahil kay Marcos. Pero hindi parang hindi natin tinanggal yung ganong klaseng association. Doon pa lang sa mga basic things, mundane things na would seem innocuous. Pero pag araw-araw kang dumadaan sa Marcos Highway, sa parang pumapasok sa utak ng mga tao na ito parang yung mga myth na siya nagpagawa nito or ito ay dahil sa kanya, magpasalamat tayo, etc. Parang nabubuhay yung ganong klaseng mga ideas. So I don't know about Kat, pero siguro parang ganun parang we
tama
should
nga,
be
parang,
doing something about that.
Parang yung reaction natin even when it was still fresh, parang kulang, no? Parang yeah. Kat, please.
Ako, I like Ron is from theater, no? I think it's very important to realize na the propaganda of the Marcoses didn't stop, no, post 86, but also that when your propaganda strategy is tied to cultural production, then that's insidious, that's in the everyday lives of people, that changes people's minds ideologically. And you see it in the Marcoses. On the one hand, they weren't here for a bit, and then slowly they returned. And then you saw Amy, no, doing sitcoms. You saw Irene in art exhibits, no, and theater productions, di ba? You saw Imelda singing, di ba? Yung parang they used culture, they used it during martial law, they certainly used it to get back. And they're using it so much better than any of us are even admitting at this point. I remember when I was still teaching in Ateneo, this was mga mid-2000s, I think.
Yeah.
There was a huge, among us young writers, among us writers, there was this huge thing about inviting young writers to do an anthology on Ilocos. And it was free travel to Ilocos, to the beaches of Ilocos. It was very wholesome. It was very not political, but it was an Amy project, no? In the same way that she invited artists to build sculptures, etc., in the sand dunes of Ilocos. In the same way that Irene judges many of our Philippine Art Awards and is always a presence in all of our heritage events. Di ba? Yung parang hindi sila in power nun, certainly, pero culturally, kitang-kita sila ng mga tao, no? There was all this kind of Marcos support going on under the radar. No one really likes to talk about it. But I think now that Bongbong is president, certainly it's worth talking about, no? How do we actually assess, no, the way in which culture was used, both for the good and bad. I will be the last person to say that a theater production funded by the Marcoses is already a bad thing. Kasi I trust in the taste of Irene Marcos.
Yes.
And the capability niya, di ba?
I shared that with you. Sabi nga nila, yung pamilyang yan, kung talagang patron of the arts, sila yan. And yung mga people in the arts, parang naghahanap ng ganun. After them, sino pa ba? Parang sila yung ganun.
And we didn't have any. Exactly. We didn't have any. No? Post-EDSA, Cory refused to touch arts and culture. No one has really touched arts and culture since.
Showbiz, malaki. No?
Showbiz, malaki. Iba yan. Iba usapan yan. Pero diba, yung parang I feel like, and now with the propaganda strategy of the Marcoses, just the past, maybe since 2020, No, I have a deliberately Marcos algorithm on my TikTok. And if you look at it, it's cultural. No, they don't really care for the political governmental side of it. It's all culture, no? And I think that that's something that certainly warrants a lot of conversations. Kailangan lang kaya mo sikmurain din yung makikita mo kasi. And I think that our tendency is to be dismissive right away. And just say that, they used culture to, promote fascism. But I think that time is one that is of martial law. And post martial law, it was a totally different ball game culturally. And that is something that I think is important to look at.
I agree. I'll share very briefly. No? Meron akong isang maliit na theater sideline na para akong stage manager or yung host sa doon po sa amin. But I was talking about Lawag and the tourism ng Lawag, no? Ilocos Norte. And later on, I realized that's a project being sponsored by Irene, no? Wala naman din akong Marcos na binanggit. It's just about Lawag. But you see, imbis na video production, imbis na artista, they wanted to come up with a theater piece. Parang may ganyan silang mga sensibility.
Yes.
So parang
yes. Oo. At saka yung parang kunwari the rewriting of history lang, there is an Ignacio Jimenez theater space from the Cultural Center to UP to Ateneo at this point in time. So when you Google the name of Ignacio Jimenez, he's not a Marcos crony anymore. He's actually a theater patron. Diba? I mean, that is like the best way to rewrite history about yourself. Build theaters that people will use for their theater productions.
Yeah.
Iba na yung lalabas sa Google search on you.
Talaga? Hindi ko alam yan. Ngayon ko lang nalaman.
Try it.
Naku po, yeah. So, I think you've already partially answered this question, but may follow-up naman nakadugtong to. What have organizations or institutions done or not done regarding conversations and discourses on EDSA? Hence the current indifference of the population. And conversely, might we be focusing on one angle or memorialization that alienates people? Meron ba dapat na tumbukin na area? So, ano yung nagawa o hindi nagawa ng mga institution kaya tuloy nagkaroon ng ganitong apathy or indifference or forgetfulness, amnesia on EDSA? And ano ba yung dapat na pinakatumbukin nating paksa tungkol sa EDSA para ayusin at buhayin o palitan? Ano ba? So anyone could answer. JC?
Well, from my perspective as an economist, of course, yung economic aspects of martial law, I think were severely neglected in our teaching of martial law. Na parang, of course, we have to know about the human rights violations, the way we lost democracy, etc. Pero the economic management during that time was such an important and integral part of our understanding as well. Like, how many Filipinos know that our worst recession or economic crisis happened in 84 and 85? How many Filipinos know that our highest inflation rate of 50 to 50% happened in 1984 during the economic crisis? How many Filipinos know that the underemployment and unemployment rates skyrocketed during martial law? Na parang ito yung mga economic facts na supposedly when you graduate from elementary or high school, at least you have an inkling or you have an appreciation na the worst economic statistics happened during martial law. Pero wala eh, parang
bakit nga ba hindi? That is very significant to point out, no? Hindi ko alam yan.
Na parang, yun nga, precisely, na parang even myself, na parang it was only much later that parang napagtagpi-tagpi ko na it's very stark when you look at the economic statistics na parang, and yet yun nga eh, parang such an integral part na wala. And supposedly, these are things that people relate with, na parang yung presyo ng mga bagay, yung employment, etc., kita, income, etc. These are everyday things that people care about. Pero, ayun eh, it's in the way we kind of we didn't really teach this, unfortunately. And yun nga yung something that I'm trying to pitch in somehow in my own little way with my book, my talks, etc. Pero I realized as well early on na parang this is something that needs to be included or institutionalized. Parang, and yun nga, unfortunately, with the current direction of the Department of Education, kung saan yung diktadurang Marcos na phrase, they reduce it to diktadura. Na parang it's seemingly an innocuous thing, just removing the name of Marcos kasi anyway, isa lang naman yung dictatorship, so might as well just do the diktadura. Pero yun parang they're kind of chipping away at it in small ways, pero parang it adds up later on. It will snowball later on na parang and no one's really paying attention, unfortunately.
And parang the
tayo
Marcoses know that game, no? Yung mga chipping away, increment.
Exactly.
Parang alam nila yung efficacy niyan
Exactly.
Sa atin innocuous yan.
Oo. And siguro
It's a
just to add,
veritable frog in the boiling water.
yeah, exactly. Siguro just to add then, just yesterday, I think, na balita sa news na they made commemorative stamps. Yung PhilPost, they made commemorative stamps featuring Juan Ponce Enrile because of his 100th birthday. And then si Liza Araneta Marcos, it was also reported in the news na she is kind of heading this new project to try to modernize yung Cultural Center of the Philippines, pero they want to tap money coming from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, which goes back to how they abused the old Central Bank of the Philippines, which by the end of the dictatorship lost more than 300 billion pesos because they coerced the central bank to lend to the cronies. Imagine the central bank, the sole monopolist when it comes to printing money, they lost 300 billion pesos by the end of the regime. And it's all because...
mo ba, Sir Ron, is tapusin muna to bago ka magtatanong ng mga tanong mo? O may itatanong ka na ngayon?
Hindi. Actually, kahit hindi ako sumulat ito, these are actually my questions. Whoever prepared these questions are...
JC, do we just let them be? Kasi parang alam na natin ang ending nito.
Ayun nga.
Yeah, but let's listen to Kat first now. Let's listen to Kat first. Yun nga yung pinakatanong natin dito, no? Ano yung hindi nagawa o hindi nagawa kaya tuloy nagkaroon ng ganitong indifference sa EDSA narrative, no? Yeah.
I think the major problem with the EDSA narrative since 86 was that it kind of focused on the big personalities. No? And syempre the big personalities, I mean, JC mentioned Enrile, di ba? Bumalimbing na siya ng katakot-takot since then, has changed his story so many times. Ngayon, nasa commemorative stamp na siya. Di ba yung parang, how do you deal with a character like Enrile being such an important part din naman talaga of ousting the dictator? Diba? Parang, paano nga ba yun? And I think that we don't really, parang at this point, medyo ang hirap ng i-assess no? Kasi it's also being used against people who do believe in EDSA and who do want to understand better how we won it. And I think one of the best ways to talk about how we won it is to bring it back to the people. No? How did people power actually happen? EDSA was about people coming together in a massive civil disobedience campaign that canceled huge companies that were crony companies that were in support of Marcos. It effectively paralyzed the economy. We were gearing up for a nationwide work stoppage on the day that Marcos was going to declare himself the winner of the election. We were so ready for it. We were ready to not pay utilities, not pay taxes. Mayors were freaking out that they would not have enough taxes in their coffers to actually run their city halls. No? Schools were canceled, work was canceled, banks were in crisis. So para sa akin, yun yung sa tingin ko napakahalagang part of EDSA legacy that we don't really talk about anymore. We've never really talked about it. I realize now that no one really dove into that research. I've just been lucky that it was always something that Angela framed her 4 days of EDSA on. And so as I grew into the story of EDSA, that was what I latched on to. She herself latched on to the 4 days and built that body of work on the 4 days of EDSA. 2 years ago, I decided, okay, what else have we not talked about? And it was really the civil disobedience campaign. And so I really, really believe that that's something that we can continue to talk about, look at. Even economically, I think there's a lot of interesting things that happened from Feb 16 to Feb 25 in relation to that boycott. The other thing, I think, yung question of, are we just gonna let them do this? No, yung parang exactly repeat what they did, no, during the senior Marcoses time. Ideally, we
They are
don't.
repeating history.
Oo, sila talaga yung nagre-repeat. Oo naman. I mean, even just, the revival of the name Maharlika, no? For the where he lands every time he arrives from elsewhere, the Maharlika Fund, the terno. Sa akin, major yung terno. Soon after they won the presidency in 2022, I went to Davao for a book launch. And lahat ng tinitinda sa Tiangge ay naka-butterfly sleeves. And when I asked the tinderas, kailan to nag-start? Nung nanalo lang. Nung nanalo si Bongbong, there was a massive parang decision across Davao na lahat ng government officials na babae, kailangan naka-butterfly sleeves na. Cultural yun eh. Di ba, binabago ka culturally, tinatanggal mo yung pagkaka-equate ng butterfly sleeves with the dictatorship and Imelda Marcos's excesses. It's really, to me, that's really the undercurrent of the return of the Marcoses. And I think we battle it out culturally then. And it's really a challenge for the cultural sector in terms of how to fight it out and fight it tooth and nail. Kasi mahirap siya, admittedly, no? And
paano nga siya, Katrina? So, naintindihan ko na si JC yung economics, ikaw yung civil disobedience. So, I agree with you, no?
Yeah.
Marami ako alam about EDSA na yun lang nakaranas dati noon. Yung mga estudyante na gumraduate noong 1986 ay pinunit nila yung kanilang mga diploma. Hindi naman kailangan. But that was the fire then eh. Iba yung kwento ng mga tao, hindi yung mga historical points lang.
Figures,
pero may fever talaga noon eh. I can imagine. Probinsyano ko, I didn't know so much what was happening here. Pero alam ko lang na wala kaming pasok kasi mga teachers namin pupunta sa EDSA sasali. So that was, ganun kalaki yung epekto noon. So yun ang hindi masyado nakakwento. Nakikwento lang yung mga may petsa, yung mga may dates.
Yeah.
Pero yung mga ginagawa ng mga tao noon, how impassioned they are, parang wala masyado yun. So ang tanong nga paano nga ba? Paano mo iuusuli yun? How do you reignite? How do you reignite that? How do you wake that up? Maybe what kind of what would help us
relive it?
Relive or come up with the resurgence of all these memories? Hindi ko alam, paano ba?
I think I go back to this is something that I've been saying since the Duterte years, no, when we were problematizing, parang ang tagal na, no, when we were problematizing disinformation. And I kept saying, I think we are at a time when it's not enough to tell the truth, you have to sell the truth. We all need to be in the business of selling the data that we hold and making it important to the audiences, no? Plural din yan. To the audiences of every algorithm on every platform, no? We're beyond just, dati kasi, Ron, di ba, parang pag artist ka, nasa form and content ka lang.
Yeah.
Ngayon, form, content, platform, algorithm. No, magkakaiba yun lahat. Marketing. You sell the truth. It's not enough to tell it. And I realize that as a writer, it's a very humbling thing to realize na across maybe the 10 years, 12 years that I've been writing, the audience has shrunk completely, no, for just writing commentary. Mas maliit na yan ngayon, and you accept it and you try and figure out ways of creating new things out of the same data so that you actually talk to a different audience every time. Yung benta kasi hindi tayo magaling yata doon masyado.
Oh,
Pero
yeah.
magaling sila. No? Kasi
Yeah, yeah.
propaganda is bound to
Ano
be
talaga
to
yun?
selling eh. Oo,
Yung
selling yun
minaster
eh.
nila.
Minaster nila yung selling the truth or the false. Di ba? Given false
Yeah.
nostalgia.
So,
So,
sell whatever it is they're selling, no? Parang
oo. Parang,
kahit gano'n naka-fantastic, no? Bebenta.
they
tanong
sell
na
it
lang dyan,
well.
ang tanong dyan, Katrina, sino mas magaling? Si Bird of Davao o si Ilocos Lord?
Yeah, pero tanong ba talaga yun, Sir Jovi? Or rhetorical question. Ano ba sasagutin ni Katrina? Yun. Ikaw, JC, dun sa the same question kay Kat, how do you, ano nga hakbang? Sabi mo kanina sa basic education sana, but
Pero yun, di ba? Nandun na sila eh. Nandun na
pati doon eh, parang
I think
takot
ano,
ako.
I
Sige,
need
go.
I need to get some tips from Kat on how to popularize these things kasi even dun sa libro ko, parang I acknowledge na parang siya sa starting point for conversations. I really just wanted to compile the myths and debunk them. Pero in terms of spreading them, letting people, as many people as possible know, I think kailangan na dyan yung creative juices ng kabataan, yung TikTok generation. Admittedly, I have a TikTok account pero hirap na hirap akong gumawa ng content. Parang it takes me hours to make siguro 1-minute video. Ganun ako ka-OC. Parang hindi ko alam how they do it so fast. Pero it's parang second nature to them. Parang ang dali-dali. And iba din yung sensibilities, yung language used. So I think kailangan talaga involve yung kabataan dito. Tama si Kat na parang form content, ano nga ba yun? Form and content before, ngayon dapat form content, algorithm?
Algorithm.
Correct. Ayun. So magandang formula yun actually, and I think I should really internalize that then in my own work.
I've already exhausted my prepared questions. No, I'll ask the last question mamaya na, but this question is just dumapo lang sa isip ko at gusto ko itanong sa inyo. So may narinig akong kwentuhan na for Marcos Jr., ang kailangan lang niya ay wag pumalpak at mariredeem na niya yung lahat ng kapalpakan dati or lahat ng kasamaan dati. So he does not even need to be great, no, or good, no. Wala lang siyang gawing mariredeem na. Hindi ba yun ang issue kasi pwede naman talagang hindi katulad ng ama ang anak, di ba? Pero time and time again, pinapa-recognize sa kanya na masama yung nangyari, hindi rin niya yun ang nakakatakot doon na parang there is no recognition of what was done wrong during that time. So siguro yun ang hinihingan ko ng reaction sa inyo. BBM could possibly is in a very strong platform to redeem it, right? And effortlessly or with very little effort. Paano ba 'yon? How do you deal with that? At parang ang lakas ng kalaban ngayon. Kahit ganun lang ang gawin niya, magagawa niya yung gusto niyang gawin. So, I don't know what I'm really asking, no? As isasabi ko, ang dali-daling makuha nila ang prize ng gusto nila ngayon because nakaset lahat eh. At ang hirap-hirap talunin. So, di naman sa panalo, how do you go through this? How do you navigate this ordeal or this challenge? So, anyone can answer. Hirap yata ang tanong ko. So emotional.
Si Sir Jovi yata ang sasagot siya.
Jovi. Pwede rin.
Ako muna, para pwede i-contradict. Parang sinabi yata ni Katrina that they've been doing the propaganda since 1986.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't happen like in the last 6 years. And the motivation is very visceral, no? You want to redeem your name. I think since we are all public figures, we can relate to that, even in a very small way. Pero lalo na siguro kung I don't know if that is the I think yung sinasabi ni Katrina is the other angle na we can look at the people's history. Ibig sabihin, yung paano nga ba nabuo yung EDSA? At siguro yun in the next 9 minutes kailangan natin masagot daw, Sir Ron. Yung
Yeah.
tanong natin.
Actually, the title is Bakit EDSA pa rin? But that's really our last question to address kung meron pa tayong hindi nasasagot dun sa malaking tanong na yan.
Kasi dapat from a very philosophical point of view, para safe. Tanggapin na natin ganun yung politiko, di ba? Trabaho nila yun eh, ganun sila eh. But I think as Kat is hinting
Philosophical ba yun, sir? Hindi ba yun
philosophical yun. Kat is hinting at there's the other story. There's the other story of
that's philosophical in terms of it's so absurdist to think that parang absurdist yan na parang walang pupuntahan ng buhay.
Ano naman ang philosophy? German German fascist joke. Okay, Kat, 9 minutes. Bakit daw EDSA pa ulit? EDSA pa rin. EDSA pa rin.
EDSA pa rin kasi hindi pa natin siya naiintindihan sa tingin ko fully. I don't think that we have exhausted all the lessons that we should learn from it. And the only way we can exhaust those lessons is if we understand better what led the people to actually move in the way they did. No, not just during the 4 days going to EDSA, but also the 10 days of the civil disobedience campaign when they decided to agree with Cory, and stop supporting any business that was supporting the Marcoses. Sa tingin ko mahalaga ding i-frame yun dun sa what was it about the civil disobedience campaign of 86 that has kept us from talking about it all these years. And I think that's really because it's the scariest thing, no? Sabi nga ni Ron kanina, parang magka-cancel ka ng products. Pero ito, magka-cancel ka ng isang buong gobyerno, no? At nagawa yun ng taong bayan noong 1986. Nakakatakot yun, no? Para sa people in power, kahit pa yung katulad ni Bongbong na all he has to do is just sit and not make a mistake.
Yeah.
And he will just, di ba? And mariredeem yung pangalan, no? Or they're just looking at, another Marcos vice presidency in 2028. Nakakatakot naman ng taong bayan eh. I think we tend to forget how scary the people are once they're united around a very clear cause. And dun sa clarity tayo tumatagilid, no? Pagdating dun sa, sabi nga ni JC, pagdating dun sa facts. No, kasi hindi na nga natin, wala na tayong kakulangan ng facts. I think we have enough in the academy, enough teachers who have, built this whole archive of facts about the Marcoses. It's really about how we deliver those facts at this point in time. And babalik ako dun sa cultural siya. No? Trabaho ito ng kultura, trabaho ito ng manggagawang kultural. At hindi pa natin yan napagtutuunan ng pansin. And maybe now is the time.
Thank you, Kat. No. JC.
Before JC lang, no? Actually, we were taught civil disobedience even in our Indian philosophy class. Yun nga, it's really we need to go back to those years. Paano
Yes.
Indian philosophy. Sa
Gandhi ba yan?
Ahimsa. Peaceful.
Civil disobedience.
Yeah.
Yes, I think kaya din marami nang hindi nakaka-appreciate dun sa EDSA ngayon. I think nawala kasi yung konteksto na ano ba yung EDSA to begin with. And I would say, again, coming from an economist point of view, in a very real sense, EDSA was an economic reaction as well to the mismanagement of the martial law dictatorship. Kung saan yung worst economic crisis, yung balance of payments crisis, naubusan tayo ng mga dolyar, high inflation rate. Kasi if you think of it, it took decades for Filipinos or several years to move away from the dictatorship or at least rebuke it. Na parang we were kind of coasting along na tinitiis to the extent possible. Pero parang napuno na tayo at some point na merong famine sa Negros, hunger and poverty skyrocketed. And then parang that inspired in a huge way yung EDSA revolution. In the same way, for example, yung recent Sri Lanka uprising, di ba? That was also a balance of payments crisis if you think of it. Pero yun dahil dun sa propagation ng Golden Age myths, nawala yung konteksto ng EDSA. And in fact, when you look at social media, ang dami mga myth portraying martial law as a utopia on the one hand, pero at the same time, attributing or blaming EDSA for the ills of the economy later on na parang, sumama ekonomiya natin dahil sa EDSA. When in fact, sumama siya dahil doon sa mga nangyari before EDSA. So parang yung...
Kaya nagka-EDSA dahil ang sama na. Parang gano'n.
Ayun, exactly. Oo. Pero yun parang binabaligtad yung narrative So again, going back to the importance of stories, narratives, culture, babalik tayo sa sinabi ni Kat na parang dun yung labanan if you think of it. Not so much dun sa facts which are well established, pero how do you drill that down in people's minds? And I think culture has a huge role to play there.
A part of me
May angel na dumaan na.
Hindi, parang ay host nga pala ako, parang gano'n. Kasi tuwing nagsasalita si Kat at saka si JC, iniisip ko ano nang gagawin ko after this show, tungkol dito sa EDSA.
Challenge talaga kita, Ron. Ikaw talaga yung sina-challenge.
Parang in fact, pero yung mga ginawa sinabi natin ngayon ay parang isang malaking hindi very specific Anong gagawin ko na after this show? Or yung mga nakikinig sa atin, anong pwede natin gawin? So, yung pag sinabi natin,
maganda nga niya, Ron.
Keep it alive. Keep them alive.
Simula lang naman tayo Simula lang naman tayo
Simula? 38 years?
Hindi, itong show natin na nga.
Okay, exactly. Pero after this, kasi halimbawa, pero nang nasindihan sa atin, pero hindi naman natin alam ano bang simulan ko sa lesson ko sa klase o gawa ba ako ng TikToks o kaya kunin ko na yung whatever it is I have at i-package ko ng medyo maganda and gawin kong comics o gawin kong Avengers. Hindi ko alam. So how do you even start after realizing that was the shortcoming?
I think, Sir Ron, in the same way na yung mga Marcoses, they have been spreading propaganda for decades. Hindi siya overnight thing I think that's exactly the point na parang on our part, tayo na merong nalalaman natin yung kasaysayan, etc. This is certainly not going to be an overnight effort. Na parang we have to start with the realization that this will take decades. Pero ayun na nga, I think coming from my own experience then, we need to find ways to institutionalize yung teaching of history. We have to fix the algorithms. There's no shortcut to this, unfortunately.
Nakita ko nga ilang post ni Lenny Roberto because I follow her na parang nandito ako ngayon, I was invited to speak. Wala ating political, no? Ang ganda pala ng sunset dito, sunrise. So I think, hindi ko alam sinasadya o hindi sinasadya. Ganun na yun na yata. So sa mismong thread ng kultura ng buhay na siya umaandar. hindi na sa mga debates, no? Baka, I don't know, baka that's the way to go to. Sa amin din, nag-uusap-usap kami mga supposedly wanted to learn from what we experienced in the past. Kay Duterte, kay Marcos, no? Siguro the way to go is kung ano yung paborito mong pag-usapan mo lang. Like, kung bisikleta man yan o pagluluto, and then doon na lang sumisingit yung mga sentiments and convictions versus para kang statesman palagi or statesman palagi sa pagsasalita, then maybe that is the venue where people converge and talk, no, kaysa dun sa mga political debates.
Ako siguro
pag napakinggan yung mga tao, yayamot na din sila ngayon.
So dapat yata pag-usapan. Ayan, okay.
Siguro
Katrina.
very quickly, no? I think it's always a balance of talking about the past and being very present in the present. No? Kasi ang bilis din ng daloy ng information. Ang dami nilang ginagawa sa gobyerno. Tapos hindi tayo nakakahabol. We're at the mercy of not even the news cycle, which is what we were at the mercy of before. We're at the mercy of algorithms, no, and then our news feeds. I think that a major crisis point for the Marcos government now is charter change. Regardless of whether it's CONAS, the PI, the People's Initiative, this argument between the Senate and Congress, I think it's something that will galvanize people together. Charter change talks has always galvanized people together. No, we generally don't like it across social classes. And so I think that what Congress, what the House of Representatives has been doing is really something we should be talking about, and we're not talking about it enough. So parang sa akin yan yung present tense na pwede nating pagtuunan ng pansin. Yung taranta about talking about the past and how to reformulate that, I believe in small projects. No, do what you can in the small places that you belong to, because those small things can be gathered and make a big thing. No, I do very small projects all the time that have to do with, trying to talk about history and then tying it to the present. I don't think that it does any of us good when you're so pressured to do a TikTok video. Parang okay, baka hindi dapat, di ba? Parang if you're wasting too much time on something, then maybe that's not the form that it should be happening in for you. Pero naniniwala ko sa capacity ni Ron na magpalawak ng kanyang cultural skill set.
Ano na yan ang lawag eh.
Oo.
Matagal na yun. At saka I felt a little betrayed nga. Ito pala yun. Ganun. Nung nakita ko nung event proper, sila yung nandun. Kasi when we were doing it, I was just an actor memorizing a script, and I wanted to have tourism. Pero yung pala sila. And that was even a government na not under them. So in their mini government of Lawag or Ilocos Norte, meron pala silang mga ganon. So I didn't think they were...
Meron akong dalawang una yung sinabi ni Lando Hocano. We are intrinsically divisive. So mukhang ganun din naman yung pamilya nila. Pero sana mag-unite yung opposition sa 2024. Yun ang EDSA pa rin.
2025!
2025. Pero syempre
ngayon na dapat. Oo, tsaka dapat mas maaga natin sinisimulan.
Yes.
The fact na pinag-usapan natin ng pagsimula ay late na tayo eh. Dapat kasi matagal.
Late na pala. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Last words? Sir.
Yes, please. Kasi ang hirap ubusin ng pag-usapan dito. So ano man sa palagay ninyo, kailangan pang masaid from your diwa, JC at Katrina. Please address our audience. Kahit sino mauna, sino mas ready. Ikaw na, Katrina.
I think that EDSA pa rin because we have so much more to learn from the 10 days of civil disobedience. I think that we have to champion what people were able to do at EDSA, not just what the personalities did to finally oust the dictator. I think that there is value in believing in non-violent protest, because that is what EDSA championed, and that's what put the Philippines on the map. And it made it a model for a lot of other non-violent protests across the world. So when I talk to, and maybe just to end with some hope, when we built our exhibition on the 10 days of disobedience and everything's fine, we've had people come in, new people coming in, young kids wanting to talk about it. They wanted to understand what EDSA was about, and they wanted to know better what it is they can do in the present. And so it's not hopeless, certainly. And I think that it's really a matter of not just telling the truth, but using that truth to actually talk about the present in ways that will be better understood by new generations on different algorithms and on various platforms.
So this is an exhibit at your gallery, right?
Yes, we're at Prince Tower 14 Tordesillas in Salcedo Village.
All right.
JC? Thank you, Katrina. Yeah.
Yes, I agree dun sa sinabi ni Kat na we should start with our own small ways, our own circles. I think that's also very important. In my case, yung libro ko is, I think, my own little contribution to this. And I think it's heartening actually to hear. And in fact, some teachers in high school are sending me photos of them using the book already in their own classes. So I think that's one of my proudest moments as author of this book. And yun din, parang I think kailangan we should find ways to institutionalize talaga yung better teaching of not just yung economics of martial law, but martial law in totality. Pero I think yung there needs to be reforms as well do sa social media platforms and algorithms kasi with the rise of deepfakes and in fact yung ChatGPT, di ba, it can already make videos as well. So parang parang ano it's going to be a tide of disinformation if we don't control it. So I think we should take steps to arm ourselves and arm our children, our kids, the young generation, so that they can discern better what's real and what's not. That's going to be a much harder task moving forward, and I think we should be doing a lot more to arm them with critical thinking skills. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right.
Thank you so much sa inyong dalawa. Ano sabi mo, Sir Jovi?
False nostalgia.
False nostalgia. Please, kung wala pa kayong kopya nun, tangkilikin natin kasi feeling ko may marami tayong mapupulot doon na nakakagulat.
Ako rin.
Kasi
Ako rin,
please,
magpo-promote ako ng libro. Baka mapagalitan ako ng nanay ko.
yeah, EDSA Uno. Yeah.
So this is my mom's last book on the EDSA Revolution of 1986. This is called EDSA Uno. It's available on Everything's Fine's Lazada account, but also at the shop in Tordesillas. Maraming salamat.
Bakit EDSA Uno? Because you're referring to the original?
To the first one, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Papadalhan ko kayo ng kopya.
Yeah, please. Ako wala, parang gusto ko na matapos to kasi gusto ko na mag-isip mag-isa. But maraming salamat sa inyo for this very provocative discussion and very fitting dahil na magkakaroon tayo ng paggulita pero walang holiday, baka malay niyo meron. Kasi linggo naman siya. I don't think there's pero last year parang
okay na daw yun, sabi ni Oliver. Wala holiday.
Okay, sige. Bakit? Baka mamaya maago pa yung narrative or kumbaga, di ba? So baka at their mercy pa. Anyway, there's a lot to think about, but I hope that is also the effect to our audience or audiences. Iba-iba kasi yan sa atin. At maraming salamat sa pagtulong sa amin sa pagpukaw ng aming mga tagapakinig di sa Lundagin Beybeh. Ma'am Katrina Santiago, Sir JC Punumbayan. Sir Jovi, sa ating pag-uwitan ng EDSA, by the time bumalik tayo rito, tapos na yung February 25. So sana maging malalim at mabunga, makulugan.
Meron tayong pagdiriwang ng Global Social Justice Day next week.
Okay. Good. So yun lang, hanggang sa muli po. Maraming salamat sa iyong pakikisa sa amin dito sa palatuntunan namin Lundagin mo, Beybeh. Dito sa Radyo Katipunan. Hanggang susunod na Lunes po. AMDG.
Walang sino man ang nabubuhay para sa sarili lamang. Walang sino man ang namamatay para sa sarili lamang. Tayong lahat ay may pananagutan sa isa't isa. Tayong lahat ay tinipo ng Diyos na kapiling niya. Sa ating pagmamahalan at paglilingkod sa kanino man, tayo ay nagdadala ng Panginoon bilang mga ay nagmahal ay may tulas ng isa sa isa ay nagmahal ay tinipon ng Diyos at namahal ko sa Inya. Sabay-sabay ng mga awitan ng mga bansa ako'y sinusain ng Panginoon bilang mga ay nagmahal ay magpapalapit sa isa sa isa ay nagmahal ay kapatid ko at namahal sa Kanya. Tayong lahat ay palipitan sa isa't isa pako. Tayong lahat ay kapatid ko at ika'y pananagutan ko.
Meron? Ano nga ba ang meron? Paano nga bang mabuhay ng tapat sa meron? Don't you wish you can relive your philo classes? The terror teachers? The terrible oral exams? Or the even terrifying but liberating and life-changing aha moments? Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Here's your chance! Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Kasama ang mga pilosopong sina Jovi Miroy at Capinding. Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Leaping upward, leaping forward. Lundagin mo, Beybeh! Leaping to greater heights, to greater wisdom, to greater magis. Lundag na, Ateneo!